You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. This week, the party talk about risk and failure. Players, what do you do when you've suffered a setback, or even worse, lost a fight? And GMs, how do you pick up a campaign and turn it around when all of your player characters are unfortunately dead? Stay tuned to find out how you can snatch victory from the jaws of defeat.
Welcome to the party. I'm Shane.
I'm Savage.
And I'm Owen.
And here we're here to talk about a difficult topic, which has a high chance of completely backfiring on us. Failure and the risks thereof.
It is the easiest thing in the world to do. Failing, I mean.
It depends on the system.
Intros, not so much. I think it's so easy to fail that really we should be doing more of it all the time, in fact. It just makes things so much more interesting.
People, well, I have my own particular thoughts on people's relationship with failure, but in my classic style, I've overthought it to an obscene degree and have half a page of notes on something.
You are an overthought.
Yeah?
They do very well on the internet. Thoughts. Or am I using that right? Is that correct? No, I think I've gotten that wrong.
I do not know if that's
the thoughts are mostly on Twitch, right? And Insta.
I feel like we're cutting an awful lot of this. So failure to launch right there. But we're going to talk about failure in terms of how it affects games and how we should deal with failure as both players and if we're running games or just adjudicating games. And this is sort of failure in the short and long term, isn't it? The simplest way of determining success and failure in most games is roll a dice, right? So we get a very clear, you've succeeded or you've failed. But is that really... I mean, there's a lot of nuance there as well. I know a lot of people like to use as many of the mechanics as possible in a game to turn things in their favour. Owen, is there much to be said for making sure that you fail as little as possible?
Okay, when you design your RPG, you should have access to a basic knowledge of statistics. I've seen some RPGs designed by some very well-meaning people who didn't actually understand how stats work and might rock up going, okay, yeah, we think this is a pretty reasonable RPG. And you realise that a starting character in an area they're competent in has a 20% chance of succeeding. And they're like, well, that seems a little low. And I'm like, it's very low. You think you'll find that most people would prefer 50% or greater chance of succeeding. And in actuality, people would be more comfortable with the 70 to 75% chance of succeeding. Savage Worlds, which is one of the most basic probabilities to calculate. If someone has D6 in a skill and is a wildcard and is attempting a difficulty 4 task, which nearly every task in Savage Worlds is difficulty 4, they have a 75% chance of succeeding based on those two dice, roughly. D&D, if you've got like a +10 modifier and the DC is 18, you've got your 60% chance of success. Unless you can do that basic probability, go talk to someone who can do basic probability, because you will create huge problems for yourself. There was a game called Cthulhu Tech, which rolled dice pools of D10s. We won't even get into the other stuff, but rolled dice pools of D10s and basically asked people to make poker sets, like I got 4 3s, or I got a 1 2 3 4, so that's a run, and you calculate success based off that. It was a complete train wreck, because they didn't actually do any of the probability checks on it. You needed to throw huge quantities of dice at problems before you started getting any sort of reasonable solutions. In Old Deadlands, if you were playing a huckster, you had to draw a hand of cards. I draw 6 cards and I try to make 2 pair on a poker hand. And you're like, do you know the probability of getting 2 pair from 6 cards in poker? It is not high,
No, it's not.
So all these things, you need to have an understanding of what your base success and failure chances are. Until you do that, everything else is crazy talk. So the first thing first, do the math. Figure out what a basic character should succeed at. I would recommend 50 to 70% of the time on a standard task.
Yeah. It does mean that in the design space and the number space, you now have a very high floor and a cap on your ceiling, really. I mean, because once you get to, I can do it 100% of the time, do you need to be able to do it 110% of the time? No. So obviously that the gap between competent and really good at something has to, by necessity, be much smaller than we see in a lot of systems.
This is possibly the reason behind the bounded accuracy that D&D 5th Ed is currently getting all kinds of praise for.
It's lazy, but anyway.
It solves a problem, but
we really need to get Sean back on to defend his baby.
It is my way to throw the occasional barb at D&D 5th Ed.
Oh, it's got a big old tough hide. You can take it.
Yeah, it's massive success. Will have to be some comfort.
So, Shane, speaking of things that need to have a tough old hide, obviously as a DM you have to make a friend of failure, because by definition almost most of your plans are going to fail if your players are going to succeed. Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's something that a GM really has to learn to let go of. I in particular have had to train myself to never get attached to an NPC, no matter how cool they are or what wonderful monologue they're about to deliver. Unfortunately, as soon as initiative dice is rolled, one can assume that they and all of the very plot relevant information that they were supposed to dump on the players will disappear in a couple of hasty criticals.
I think there's another aspect of failure there, but that's a different sort of failure. A failure in planning or a failure in pacing. I know exactly what you're talking about, but I do think that with a little creativity you can get enough time to drop your speeches while still keeping action on the table. But we'll get back to that. So you were saying?
Well, that's...
Sorry.
I
shouldn't be stepping over.
My main. Well, I have my big super point that I want to deploy at some point, but for this particular element of things, this is like, a GM always has to keep failure in mind and has to be expecting. Well, it's an interesting tightrope to walk, because you have to roleplay your NPCs and your villains as if they assume victory, while simultaneously leaving all the ways that the players will ultimately succeed on the table. And villains are one of the big ways of doing it, because you sort of want to. It's the presentation of threat problem, is that you want your opposing forces to be very intimidating and threatening, and either because they're smarter, or they have more of them, or they have the bigger numbers, or all three. But ultimately, they will be undone, maybe by luck, or maybe by their own hubris. If you're a GM, you kind of have to. You kind of have to be ready to jettison the idea of the omnicompetent villain, the mastermind who has thought 57 steps ahead. Is, while interesting as a dramatic device, is problematic as a game device, and often you're just going to have to go, well, he lost. He underestimated the villains. Dr. Doom was beaten by squirrels. That just. You just have to accept that, because the purpose of the game is to run the game for the players, not to extol the genius of Dr. Doom and how he's better than Richards.
Okay, but that does require some balance. I mean, your players aren't going to appreciate knockover wins. They do want to feel like they had to earn them in some respect. So I take your point that it shouldn't be the villain has absolutely every contingency covered, but I do think that while they might not have omnipotence, villains are sort of opposing organizations or groups to your players should have resilience, in the sense that they can suffer a loss at the hands of the players and have a fallback position from which to rally. So you stop them from getting the plutonium, but their fallback position is they're going to use the sort of bomb they've built to be used as a dirty bomb in some other respect. They'll use some lower grade stuff. So now the chase is to find the bomb that is no longer going to blow up the city, but would irradiate the city. And then that creates the next level of tension while still pushing down on the villain's resources and ability to win in stages.
Yeah, you're trying to maintain drama, but not necessarily. The power balance of a villain organization in mid collapse is an interesting one, because you sort of have to replace the armies of mooks and the high level lieutenants that have already been killed with desperation. And you're sort of wanting to have the players go through the same process, so that they do not get to operate on their terms, and they have to come out of their things to risk. You may have ultimate power in when you're connected to the power grid, but that means the bad guys will cut the power grid, even though that ruins plans A through G. Each side has to react to failure, and you're sort of trying to get the players to react to their own success and failure both have to have consequences, I guess, for both sides.
Owen, how do you sort of balance this one?
Well,
go ahead.
So, if you go and decide, right, you as the GM can use effectively maths to force a certain outcome, if you want. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but let's say you go, right, they're going to try and sneak into this facility. I decide I want to fight on the outside. You go, okay, every party member individually has to make 3 stealth rolls to get into the facility without enacting suspicion entering a fight. Away you go, lads. There's 4 people in your party, there's 3 rolls, that's 12 rolls. Even assuming they have like a 70% chance of success, you've got an excellent chance of generating a failure and generating the result you want at that point. Now, you still have to have a contingency for what happens if they fail, pass all the stealth rolls and get in. Are you fine? Just, you get in without any sound. Or you go, okay, fine. Only one person goes, the good stealth person, but then they fail a roll. Do they now get in the fight that I designed for the whole party? You have to have a think about both sides. It is very valuable in GMing to have fallback positions where, like, they'll typically call this fall forward or failure with effect, where if someone fails a roll, they still get the clue, but there's an additional cost on it, or there's something they don't want to happens,
You don't fall straight down into the bottomless pit because you flubbed one athletics check. You're now dangling off the edge, or you found a pipe halfway down the bottomless pit. But yeah, like a 1 dice failure, it makes it the failure of the dice has a consequence, but it's not necessarily a terminal consequence. It's something that can still be responded to.
Your campaign shouldn't hinge on a dice roll. Sometimes it does, and I'm not a fan, but like sometimes you get to that point, but your campaign shouldn't hinge on a dice roll. There should just be there should be consequences of failure, there should be repercussions of failure, but they should not be or should not feel punitive. If you go
Sorry.
Make 20 stealth checks, you failed, your character gets killed. That will generate intense feelings of displeasure.
Yeah, I do like that idea that whether it's the party failing or the antagonist failing, it should be a bit like Wesley falling down a hill in The Princess Bride. It's lots of bumps and scrapes along the way. It's not a straight drop off a cliff. That they're gonna hit all these things on the way down, and perhaps have a chance to catch themselves or turn things around before they hit the bottom.
Yeah.
As the failure with cost, and it's because that cost becomes a way to kind of put steps on the ladder to allow you to make things harder or to make things easier depending on what is being paid for or what is being lost.
And they can be used as a way to bring agency back into the game. If you make the choice to say, okay, you failed by 2 points, so you can choose to succeed, but you definitely trip the alarm. It is a cool narrative option to give to a player. It's the ability to, well, yeah, you failed, but that gives you a choice to what consequence do you want to accept. And I think it's a good idea to be sort of training players in how to... Training is such a touchy term to use, but to get people in the habit of accepting consequences. Because one of the things you'll find if your party members are empowered to nullify just blank out all consequences they have, is that you could find your failure state escalating beyond your ability to control it. Good example would be stereotypical D&D combat, where because of the resource management-y way the combat's supposed to go, people will tend to, instead of having like 5 little fights, in the interests of drama and experience, they'll all get collapsed into one huge fight where the players just unload all of their big high-level spells and once per long rest abilities and such into one big fight. And that could create a degenerative game state where, because in the short term, going all in like this is actually kind of the safer option. It means that there's no stake between we got we beat the bad guys, wiped them out, nuked them off, and we have been utterly destroyed, and that we're all being reduced to ashes by the 5 liches that the GM had to put us in any challenge. So
are you saying that there's occasions when players will tend to win at all costs only to leave themselves open to failure further down the line?
Sort of, yeah. It's just like people can get very fixated on the short term, and it's just like, I spend my rerolls for the day on this check because I don't want to be, I don't want to miss this notice roll and this ambush, or I spend my healing now on these couple of scratches, where really when the boss battle comes around, they suddenly don't have any escape plan or sustainability. And stuff like, spending your skill rerolls to get little things. It's just a matter of it. What you want is the players to be taking risks in the short term in order to build to long-term success. Like, they should be accepting, the bad guy got away this time, but we found the vital clue, or we took on this crowd of orcs, means they're not reinforcements in the final battle, even if it means taking, if it means using up a bunch of spells. Like, it's a difficult tightrope to walk, because you want people to be used to the idea that a consequence now can be interesting or lead to a better thing, rather than just reducing the game to a big boring, it's a huge massive fight and either we win or we die. But there's all kinds of other things to consider it, like such as previous episodes we may have talked about people's unwillingness to run away, or an even older episode about how hard it is to get people to surrender. It's a tough one to get your head around.
The thing is, you need to, when you're designing your stuff, know one role. Having one role save the day is to a certain extent bad. Having one role lose the day is definitely wrong. So you need to find your even middle between that. Like, there can be absolutely critical roles and critical turns, and your players get lucky and, oh my god, that was amazing, and that's perfectly fine. You also have times when, oh my god, you know, everything went pear-shaped and we just kept failing and failing and failing. And, you know, that has to be okay too. It can't be a disaster that ends the campaign. Like, you need to sort things out so that, you know, the world doesn't end if something goes wrong.
Yeah. Like those are classic points in any adventure when the heroes are brought low and they have to pick themselves up and rally, and if the most obvious path to success is now closed to them, then they now have to get inventive and find ways to achieve their goals without sort of being, oh, we failed once, so we can never get it done now.
Yeah,
and you've got to build that in. You can't just assume they'll think of something. You've got to throw them a bone, especially when stuff starts to go really badly wrong. You've got to afterwards throw them a bone and make sure they don't lose hope, because your players actually lose hope rather than just getting a bit upset. Like, getting upset when you fail is completely normal human reaction. What you need to do is go, okay guys, there is a way out, or this is another option, and put it on the table immediately for them. Give them something to think about, even if they're like, you know, screw that option, I don't like that option at all, let's think of something else. But give them something immediately to work with.
Yeah, there's the old Raymond Chandler trope of a guy with a gun kicks in the door. Has a nice mirror in this, that you can take an NPC from previously in the campaign that rides to the rescue. And the thing I like about this is that it could be one of those moments where failure seems inevitable. The players are sort of accepting the fact that they're at the bottom of the ladder here. And then an NPC that they've had a good interaction with shows up unexpectedly and throws them that bone. And because it's not just, oh, the GM has decided to let you off the hook, it's because you've planted the seeds of your escape earlier in the campaign by having someone on side or someone who owes you a favour, and now it comes good. And that way, it's unexpected. It is a bit of a Hail Mary. You can still make your players work for their escape or for their resurrection or salvation. And yeah, as you say, it allows you to build something in that feels a bit more organic because it's something they've already interacted with, a friendly NPC. But it's worth having in the back of your mind that, okay, if things go really wrong here, who might there be to show them an escape tunnel, or arrive in a car, or, you know, bring a gunship over the ridge.
Yeah, I mean, you want that, especially if it's somebody who they've helped out previously. This feels a lot more organic, and it preserves the illusion of agency, where they're like, yeah, that guy helped us because we helped him previously. And, you know, the world goes on, and that was a good decision we made, and we feel, you know, yeah, we were justified in what we did there.
Yeah,
and that's all
it makes
a good
you
thing.
feel like, okay, you didn't win this time, but things you did in the past have made sure you don't utterly fail, so from here go forward.
Yeah, but you also want to make clear that, you know, if you escaping and winning and fighting another day will work. Like, if your stakes are too high and the cultists are literally in the middle of the ritual to summon Tiamat and, you know, end all life or whatever, you know, then your get out clause has to be very immediate. Whereas if it's literally just, you know, well, you need to get out of this fight, have one long rest, and then try again with the, you know, slightly different boss setup and different terrain.
But it's also, something like that can actually be an opportunity to throw something really out of left field at them. Like, let's say they're super badly losing a fight against Tiamat, right? Like, and they're getting their asses completely kicked. And then basically a portal opens, and basically a silver lance gets dropped down on the field, and it's a dragon lance. And then that'll become, and maybe they beat Tiamat or stop Tiamat's dragon or avatar with the dragon lance, and then like, okay, where the hell did this thing come from? How did that happen? What happened there? And it can be an opportunity to spin off a new plot element. Like, you can throw something wild out there and be like, okay, this is a new plot we're now involved in. And it can look like, okay, this is new plot now? Something different is happening? It's an opportunity to throw something really wacky and kind of out of left field in there. And maybe that turns into a plot element later on, you know? Maybe suddenly they're in Terminator. without realizing it, you know.
Yeah,
but basically,
I like
when someone
that, yeah.
came in from the future to save us, why?
Oh, well, even
What did
better
this
if it's
happen?
them.
Yeah,
If it's them
exactly.
from the future, it's like what? Yeah, I think there's great opportunities because a state of failure like that, the players are going to be very receptive to any sort of olive branch or any hook that's dangled. They're going to grasp onto it because it, I suppose, instinctively you know that it changes the game in some way that perhaps they can take advantage of to pull success out of failure at some point.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to sort of move the track along slightly and sort of say one thing I've become very fond of in terms of running a game is to let players at a macro sense choose what they're going to fail at by presenting two things that are equally urgent and need to get done, and make it kind of clear that they can only do one. So they're going to have to take the win on one and the consequences that there's going to be a failure to act on another one, and that's going to move things, that's going to sort of change the balance of a campaign in some way that is interesting, because you know, in the sense that you're not going to win every fight sometimes because you can't fight every fight.
Yeah, like I think that's one of the things about failure that people find most frustrating is that people will automatically look at a failure as a sort of loss of agency, and people can get very hot up about their agency in a game because, well, that's the ability to make decisions is what they came here to do. So if you bring up you sort of have a paradigm where success and failure both lead to extra choices, then failure becomes not so much an option but acceptable alternative to, you know, breaking themselves backwards to succeed at this one dice roll. So interactive failure essentially is a state that you should probably try to engender in things. Like if it, you know, put your dice to the line, and if it comes out, there's still going to be a game, and there's still going to be, you're still going to be playing, but you're going to be playing through the consequences of that, everything going pear-shaped.
So, what should players do to sort of deal with failure, prepare themselves for failure?
What's the old saw, like, you know, adapt, adapt thing, overcome. It's basically, you've got to be sanguine about, like, failure. It can be very frustrating. You actually might need to blow off some steam, go, oh my god, that's my third one, dear god, F my life, you know. And you've got to at least let the tension out a little bit, but you've also got to try and play well and play around the bad rolls. Like, you can play around bad rolls a lot of the time. There's times when you're just getting hockeyed and you're just like, oh, God almighty. And I just gotta hope my luck turns around a little bit, because this is just killing me. Or you go default to some tactics that maybe some lower risk stuff that'll, like, okay, this isn't going to be as effective, but it might chip me on my way there, you know. So just be flexible, and then occasionally go, okay, reassess my tactics. The current tactics are not working. Maybe that's just because I'm rolling terribly, but I need to try something else. Be flexible and be willing to retreat and be willing to kind of go, let the GM throw you a bone without getting too skeptical about it, you know. But you have to have that chance of failure, and I mean, you know, it's like if you have 1,000 fights in a campaign, shouldn't you lose one or two of them?
Yeah. You could think about it in character design terms. Don't make a character who disintegrates if he loses, or don't make the perfect Superman who is made of glass, and if one thing goes bad for him, suddenly everything falls apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's often that mistake that's made by a lot of players who tend to build loners with no network, that they end up, well, if you fail, you're completely on your own, as opposed to you can go home, mom will cook you some of your favourite ratatouille, and you can kind of recoup and maybe get in a better space to go at it again. Or to have a sidekick who can help you out in a pinch, or to have a trusted mentor who can sort of offer some sage words of advice or maybe a different perspective. All of which are, of course, mouthpieces for a GM to kind of pick you up and dust you off after failing and put you back on the right path.
Yeah.
Always handy.
Before we wrap up, we should probably broach the ultimate end scale of any failure. Is it all right for a campaign to end with everyone dead, the world doomed, and the gods destroying the world and starting over or whatever? Is it okay to have a total campaign loss as a viable ending of a game?
Yeah, everything's okay as long as you're okay with your car being keyed afterwards. I mean, like you can do that. It's just I wouldn't aim for it. If it happens, it happens. But it might leave a lot of if it's because of ill luck, or because of because then it'll leave a very bad taste in people's mouths. If it's because of a series of increasingly poor choices, I think that's fine. But you probably have to give them an opportunity to play in the same world down the road afterwards, or at least redeem their failure a little bit. Like in a video game, you don't get one go at everything. You get to try again, and sometimes that trying again is very important. So failure shouldn't be so devastating that it ends everything, but neither should it be without consequence. So you want to find the happy middle there and talk to your players, and have the boring adult conversation about guys, you're screwed. You're screwed. Sorry, but we could do something else. How about we all play your grandchildren 100 years later or something, because this particular turn of events isn't going to be terribly happy.
Yeah, I do think I wouldn't consider it happened because I rolled a 20 and you rolled a 1 is a viable reason to have something like this happen. I feel like it would have to be a consequence of the players' informed and deliberate action. They put the cards on line. I certainly wouldn't do it unless it was dramatic. I would probably twist things a bit to at the very least have them escape, or have it be one of those mutually assured destruction draws. But for it to be a total failure, it would have to be because of what the players did, and not because of a trick. Shouldn't be because, the person who told you that the red lever would save the world was actually a spy. No, that wouldn't be acceptable. And again, as an extension of the one dice roll shouldn't cause ultimate failure, I don't think one event should necessarily totally doom the world. An awful lot of apocalypses happen, take quite a long time to develop. Just look at any Final Fantasy. You'll find that the point between where the world starts ending and the final battle can be a good 30 hours of grinding and side quests. So, you can probably stretch out your end game a bit to give them a second shot in most circumstances. The stuff that they decided they were trying to save may all have been burned in the meteor storm, but they could still technically win, or at least get revenge. They can be Avengers, as it were.
I think it's incredibly genre dependent, and it has to be sort of built into the fabric of the game that you might be exploring a doomed world where it's more interesting to find out how you fail. Like this is stuff that gets explored in indie RPGs all the time. Short session stuff with a kind of a collaborative storytelling aspect to it, that you're sort of breakfasting in the ruins and figuring out what the personal sort of stories of hope or tragedy are as things come to an end. Or it could be sort of existential horror like Cthulhu, where it is very, very likely that your characters are going to fail many times over. I think, yeah, it's certainly something that has to be kind of laid out at the very start of a game. And the longer you spend with a bunch of characters trying to get something done, the less acceptable it is that all of this will be for naught. I think failure, like grand failure, heroic failure, is very acceptable in short runs. But asking people to do 6 months or a year only to see everything collapse through no fault of their own, or because it's always going to be that way, is a dicey prospect. Yeah, some way back is probably required.
The ending of the game should be determined by the players, whether it be good or ill. Otherwise, why did you have 3 to 6 of your fellow players show up?
Yeah, and players can sometimes be very happy to, like, if you're going to play the crew in the Titanic, you're sort of going, okay, well, some of us are definitely not getting out of this, and there's no circumstances where we get the Titanic to its port. We know this, so let's find the interesting things inside of this game that don't have to do with unsinking a sinking ship. But yeah, absolutely, it's at that point it is down to the players to figure out what their satisfying ending is. If it isn't exactly winning, then it's failure with caveats. Okay. Well, I think we've probably gathered up enough of our thoughts at this point.
Have we succeeded or have we failed?
A big asterisk on that one, I think.
I'll have to roll some dice and see how it turns out. We've got rerolls, right?
Everyone should.
We can always come back and give it another go, right? Maybe in a couple of years.
The world may be half destroyed, but yeah, we can totally try again. Well,
what we haven't touched upon is player versus player failure. When two active participants go against each other, but I suspect we could get an entire episode of that. So let's leave that as an alternative for now.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, folks, if you think we have succeeded or failed at this campaign of explaining things to you, you can hit us up on our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Discord, and SpeakPipe. So you have all types of ways. So you have multiple ways to fail to convince us that we're wrong. But for now, this party is over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter. Or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license. But you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.